Well, as Bob said, we've been studying the book, Whom Shall I Send? Discerning the Will of God. And this is our third week on the journey. There's a few faces here that haven't been here for the first couple of interpretations, so I will start by giving a little bit of a summary of what we've learned thus far. Chapters 1 through 6 taught us that Jesus shows great compassion and understanding of human weakness, but though he's forgiving, he never waters down his message. We're in a world where the attitude, don't raise the bridge, lower the river, prevails, and if we are to follow Jesus, we have to aim for the highest attainable ideal possible with the hope of receiving greater rewards. John said this in his talk, Jesus doesn't expect the same from everyone, but he wants each person to become the best person possible. There is no authentic Christianity without ideals, expectations, and accountability. The same goes for Cursillo. The movement will not remain authentic if we change our standards to accommodate different people. We may be different people, but there must be one set of standards or the movement will become watered down. Jesus is always in communion with the Father in prayer. Communion means working with. Prayer is not just for our personal nourishment, to make us feel good. Prayer must bear fruit in action. Jesus' prayer was always directed towards the will of the Father. As Cursillo leaders, we have to realize that our prayer and study is just going to fuel our real call, which is the call to action. And that's where we set the standards for Christian service to the Cursillo, the church, and even the world. There are two kinds of power. One is the kind we hold on to, and the other is the kind we hold over people. I'm sorry, I think I just said that wrong. One is the kind we hold on to and hold over other people, and the other is the kind that we use to empower. That's better. As Christian and Cursillo leaders, we're asked to empty ourselves of ambition and the need for recognition. We have to give our power away by teaching others to take our positions. It's been said as soon as you take the position of leadership, you should begin training your replacement. Is there anybody here that would like to take pre-Cursillo?
Good work standing up.
Yeah, thanks,
I just want to get closer to my bag.
A good leader serves others by seeing a need and doing what is right. A leader is never concerned about popularity. Cursillo leaders are not in higher positions, but rather are in positions where greater service is required. Leaders are naturally ambitious and are driven, so they have to be careful not to give in to the demons of ambition, which we learned are fear of losing power and control, the need to prove greatness, the desire to lead and not serve. A true leader realizes that God is in control and does not get discouraged over failures or overconfident about successes. Leaders for Christ have to be able to do God's work because it is gratifying to serve God and not because it makes us feel good. That would be self-gratification. Our service has to always be rooted in love and not in the need for power and control. True freedom is to give power away because the more we try to hold on to it, the more it controls us. As an aside to that, I don't know about you guys, but I fall a lot. And I literally fall. Well, actually, you could probably say spiritually too, but do you ever notice that when you're about to go down, you've tripped, that you realize you've lost total control? And what's the first thing that you try to do? You try to resist, right? You try to break it, shield yourself, you want to get control back, and you end up snapping your wrist, twisting your foot, whatever. And talking about how leaders have to, give their control over to God, I thought about it should be the same thing with God. Let him have our control, but if we start resisting, then that's when we become weak. That's when we get hurt. So, you know, if I'm gonna keep falling and breaking my feet, I have to start putting these things into my talks, because God must be trying to give me some kind of message here. The other thing we learned was when we form attachments to things, ideas, or people, we become slaves to worldly things. And then our actions cause divisiveness within communities, because all of a sudden we're more concerned about what's in it for me than what is in it for all. You know, what's the best for all. Allegiance to Christ involves sacrifice, charity, joy, faith, prayer, and sincerity. John learned that the hard way, huh? When we direct our lives to Christ, we are not swayed by public opinions, and we don't seek self-gratification from material things, so we can set our sights on the highest ideals. When I was preparing to summarize chapters 7 through 9, I too found myself reflecting on the readings and the homily from Mother's Day. Our pastor, Father Tom, brought out a couple of things in his homily. One was, he talked about how the early church, working through the Holy Spirit, always strived to adopt what was best for everyone, what would bring everybody to Christ the easiest and best way. And he talked about how the church is still relying on prayer, discernment, and guidance of the Holy Spirit to make those types of decisions. He said that we can only know what God is calling us to do through prayer, discernment, and the guidance of the Holy Spirit. So Father Tom's homily reinforced in my mind that leaders of the Catholic Church make decisions the same way Cursillo leaders are taught to make decisions. And it's no wonder, because in chapters 7 through 9, we learned that the Cursillo movement is part of the Catholic Church. This is something that Dick Cole always made it his mission to bring out when he spoke at a clausura. He wanted everyone to understand that the Cursillo is an extension of the Catholic Church. It's not a separate faction. So that was interesting. That brings me to starting my interpretation of chapter 7, 8, and 9. Chapter 7 was called the Cursillo in Christ versus Cursillo or Christ. The first part of it gave the definition of the essence of Cursillo. That came from the Fundamental Ideas of the Cursillo Movement book. And it says, a movement of the church with a method of its own, it makes possible the living and sharing of what is fundamental for being a Christian. It helps one discover and fulfill one's personal vocation. It fosters the creation of core groups of Christians. It enables these groups to leaven their environments with the gospel. Now let's break that down. The Cursillo is a movement. That's a dynamic, spirit-filled reality that is of the church. And that means the Cursillo's mission is the church's mission, the spreading of the gospel to all people by being leaven in their environments. The Cursillo movement has its own method, but that method is directed to help people be Christian as they discover and embrace the special vocation that God is calling them to. Cursillo fosters the creation of core groups of Christians, and the Cursillo could not exist without a faith community, but neither could the church exist without a community.